Hello, it's good to be with you again. Can I just say again, thank you so much for your warm welcome. It's been great to be amongst you these 3 days. They have felt like a real treat for me too, so I'm very grateful for your fellowship and everything that we've shared together over these days. And so we come to 3 John. We've had 1, we've had 2, and now we're on 3. And the title, Gaius and Diotrephes, which I admit is not quite as easy to say or remember as live, love, or truth and love, but it's where we are. 3 John is the shortest book in the New Testament, and it comes in at around 219 words only. It doesn't mention Jesus once. What the NRSV translates as Christ in verse 7 is actually, they began their journey for the sake of Christ, is actually in the Greek for the sake of the name. It doesn't even mention his name. The letter doesn't mention Christ, and yet Jesus Christ and his truth shines through all of it. And as with the other 2 letters, John's main theme is the truth. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love, in the truth, I was overjoyed when some of the friends arrived and testified to your faithfulness to the truth, namely how you walk in the truth. I have no greater joy than this, to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Okay, John, we get the point now. And so over these 3 days, we've zoomed in really from 1 John, which is to the whole church, to 2 John, which is to a particular church, the elect lady and her children, and now to 3 John, which is to one person, Gaius. It's possibly the same Gaius who is mentioned by Paul in Romans 16. Gaius, who is host to me and the whole church, greets you. What Gaius seems to be very good at is hosting, hospitality. And in this letter, Gaius is commended by John for providing hospitality to travelling missionaries, people from John's church who had come back with a glowing report of Gaius and his welcome. And remember that we heard yesterday that hospitality was far more than offering a cup of tea. It was about embracing a person and the message which they brought, validating and giving credence to their teaching. Verse 8 says, therefore, we ought to support such people so that we might become co-workers with the truth. That's a wonderful phrase, isn't it? We are co-workers with the truth. To welcome someone, as Gaius had done, was to become colleagues with them in mission, in all of the ways that we've been hearing about already this morning, to spread the truth of the gospel together. Now, what seems to have happened, and we can only really piece it together, is that John the elder had written to the church, and we don't have that letter, and he'd asked them to provide hospitality to some of his number travelling in the region. And it seems that the request has been refused, bad words have been said, gossip has abounded, and any that had put them up had been threatened with excommunication by Diotrephes. Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first. Fancy being described like that. Think of the aspect of your personality and disposition that you are least proud of, and imagine that being converted into the way that you were known. So here is Emma, who can be a bit stroppy sometimes. Or there's David, who tends to be slow to accept new ideas. Or Louise, who's a bit of a perfectionist. How would you be described if you were described in terms of your worst character trait? Like Thomas the doubter and Rahab the prostitute, Diotrephes stands in the long line of biblical people who are known for their least impressive sides. So who was Diotrephes? Well, it's hard to say because he isn't mentioned anywhere else in the Bible. Some say that he was one of the first of the monarchical bishops, and that was the nature of his primacy. Some say that he was someone who wanted to impose his authority on the church. Some say that he was in conflict with John over who was in charge in the churches in Ephesus. Some say that this spat was just a misunderstanding, really, between John and Diotrephes, and perhaps Diotrephes was too vigorously putting into practice what John had said in 2 John about welcoming dodgy preachers, with some unfortunate consequences for bona fide ones. All we know is that he liked to put himself first. The word is philoprotuo. And this is the only time that word is used in the New Testament. Proto, first, leader. Philo, love. Diotrephes loved to be the leader, the first, the one in charge, the top dog, the head honcho. He loved leadership. Now I hear you cry, what's wrong with that? You are all leaders in your context, in one way or another. I'm the leader at Trinity College. And the Church of England is awash with talk of leadership at the moment. We're all meant to aspire to be leaders in some form or another. And if we are, aren't we meant to love it? Aren't we meant to enjoy what we do? What's the problem with loving being the leader? Well, nothing, but unfortunately the word doesn't really mean that. It doesn't just mean loving leadership, it means hankering after preeminence. One translation could be ambitious for distinction. And Diotrephes seems to resent John's oversight or influence in the church. He hankers after being the one to call the shots. Howard Marshall, in his commentary says this: Diotrephes is a standing warning against the danger of confusing personal ambition with zeal for the cause of the gospel. The danger of confusing personal ambition with zeal for the cause of the gospel. Now, you and I would never do that, would we? When I came to Trinity 3 years ago, the numbers of ordinands were quite low. And one of my key tasks that I was given was to increase student recruitment. And over the last 3 years, our ordinand numbers have doubled. Now, mostly I'm delighted about that because I genuinely believe that we offer a very good training at Trinity College, and I'm delighted to see as many people as possible benefiting from it. Mostly, I'm overwhelmingly excited to see young men and women passionate for the cause of the gospel. More students equals more people living like the kingdom is near, which is our strapline at Trinity. And I'm genuinely pleased because I think our ordinands will change the world for the gospel. But secretly, I'm also a little bit pleased that on my watch the graphs have gone in a good direction. And I speak tentatively because things can change overnight. Am I infected with the spirit of Diotrephes? Do I love to be first? Am I confusing personal ambition with zeal for the cause of the gospel? Are you? Ambition, success, it's a funny one, isn't it, for Christians? I live in Bristol, which has a very funny relationship with ambition. It's known as the graveyard of ambition, apparently. It's where you go if you've lived in London and had enough, and then you move west to Bristol. Our chosen spokesperson, Banksy, who is the patron saint of Bristol, puts it like this: people who get up early in the morning cause war, death, and famine. That's a very Bristol thing to say. Ambition, like sex, is a thing that Christians are not very comfortable talking about, at least not as it relates to us. Other people are ambitious, of course, worldly, sinful people, but not us. So I turn up at chapel every morning and there are 100 passionate, ambitious, enthusiastic Christians wanting to change the world for Jesus, ambitious for the gospel, ambitious for the kingdom, ambitious to see the world changed. And I love and I bless that passion in them. But many of them are in their 20s and they have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of ministry ahead of them. And that ministry will have ups and downs, it will have valleys, and it will have peaks. It will have successes, and it will have failures. How do they stay on the right side of ambition? How do they stop themselves confusing personal ambition with zeal for the cause of the gospel, like Diotrephes? If you look for ambition in the New Testament, you will find it 3 times. We are meant to be ambitious for 3 things, Diocese of Bristol. Would you like to know what they are? I will show you. Romans 15:20, I make it my ambition to proclaim the good news. We've been hearing about that already. That is a great ambition. 2 Corinthians 5:9, make it your ambition to please him. And 1 Thessalonians 4:11, make it your ambition to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your hands. Be ambitious to lead a quiet life, to do your work for God, to please God and God only, and to proclaim the good news of the gospel. Simple. I want to just take a moment and talk to the person next to you about how those three ambitions make you feel. Just briefly, just 1 minute. How does that make you feel, reading that those are the things you're meant to be ambitious for? Just take a minute together. Okay, let's be rounding up those conversations and bringing them to a close. Perhaps we could continue to hold each other to account on these things as we go back into our context. Remember what we're meant to be ambitious for, and quote these verses back to each other. I have been thinking, I wonder what Jesus would have said to Diotrephes. I think if we look at Mark 10, that gives us a helpful insight into what Jesus might have said to Diotrephes. Mark 10, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Now, I would have loved to have seen the look on Jesus' face just then, wouldn't you? It's one of those times you think, I'd love to have seen this one. Okay, whatever you ask of me. Good job, you guys. You've really got what I'm all about, wish fulfillment. Go right ahead, try it. What is it that you want me to do for you? And they said to him, grant us to sit, one on your right hand and one on your left in your glory. And Jesus shakes his head in sadness. I guess you're thinking of power, 3 thrones, me in the middle and you on my left and my right. But I'm thinking of 3 crosses, with me in the middle and 2 thieves, one on my left and one on my right, and the power of forgiveness and mercy. You truly do not know what it is you are asking. But a very small part of me admires James and John's gall, or if you read it in Matthew's account, their mother who comes to do the asking for them. This is Tiger Mum at its best. At least they tried. You know, at least they were being strategic. I have to say, I love me a good strategy. It's normal, it's godly to be ambitious. God created us with abilities and drive and a desire to work for him. He made us to be passionate about the things that he is passionate about. And he loves it when we put all of our strategies and our connections and our contacts and our abilities into work for the kingdom. One writer says, vocation is ambition ennobled. Vocation is ambition ennobled. And that is true whether you are lay or ordained. And it is true of Matthew, who we heard being called today. Vocation is ambition ennobled. Jesus was ambitious, if by that you mean he put his all into doing his Father's will. But most of the time, Jesus seemed to delight in doing exactly the opposite of the kind of things that get taught in How to Win Friends and Influence People seminars. He wasn't very good at networking. He hung out with people who were not strategic and who gave him a bad reputation. And after he had successfully fed 5,000 people, people were greatly impressed and said, "This indeed is the prophet who has come into the world." And they tried to make him king. And what did he do? He ran away up a mountain. And he wasn't very good at saying the right things. When he started to get some comments that his teaching was just a bit hard to understand, he didn't modify his language in response to popular consumer feedback. He said to his disciples, "Does this offend you? Well, I'm sorry, but it's the way it is." And he lost some from his crowd that day. Human ambition meant nothing to him, only doing the will of his Father. And as we think about going to the various ministries to which God calls us, I wonder if it's worth asking, who am I doing this for? Whose approval do I seek? Am I living, as John Wimber used to say, for an audience of one? Jesus' most successful action, the one we commemorate at this table, the single most successful thing that has ever happened in the entire history of humankind, the death of death, the defeat of sin, hell's destruction, and the opening of the gateway of life for all people for all time, looked very much like failure. It looked very much like one man alone, apart from a few close friends, naked in agony on a cross. That's what it looked like. The interplay between lament and life have both been important themes in this conference, and both of those are found at this table. Both of those are found in the cross and resurrection of Christ. Jesus, unlike Diotrephes, did not love to be first. He did not consider equality with God something to be exploited, but made himself nothing, last, least, taking on the form of a servant and humbling himself unto death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God highly exalted him. So if you want a subtitle for this Bible study, it is How to Be More Like Gaius and Less Like Diotrephes. Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but imitate what is good. Gaius showed a commitment to walking in the truth and working together as co-workers in the gospel, offering hospitality and welcome. Diotrephes, in his desire for preeminence, seemed to get in the way of offering this same kind of commitment to co-working together for truth and mission. So as you go from this place, I just leave you with a question. How might we extend a warm welcome to other believers in the spirit of Gaius? Where might we see the spirit of Gaius at work in our context, in whatever opportunities arise for us? We don't know what happened after Gaius got this letter. Did he heed the words of John and welcome Demetrius, who was probably the bringer of the letter, who came with the commendation as having the truth itself? Or did he follow the party line being peddled by power-hungry Demetrius and join in with the gossip and the excommunications? We will never know. But as with 2 John, this letter ends with an appeal to personal communication rather than writing. And he ends with a word about peace. Peace to you. What's the quality of this peace? I think as we look back through the letters of John, what shines through is that quality of the pastoral response of John the Elder to real issues in the church. John holds before us a vision of a church that is walking in the truth together and working for the truth together, confidently holding firm to the truth of the gospel revealed from the very beginning, but living in a radical new way with love for each other, a love that is shown in words and actions, welcome, hospitality, and the sharing of life. The final word, of course, must go to Tom Wright, who says, this is what the peace of which John speaks looks like. It's not an easy peace that comes from ignoring problems, but the deeper peace that comes from confronting them in the knowledge that truth and love are the two arms with which God in Jesus now enfolds both the church and the world in one embrace. Diocese of Leicester, may this peace be with you today and always. Amen. It ends by saying, greet each other by name. So turn to the person next to you and greet them by name.